Our next teller is Lillian. And Lillian Shoji comes all the way from Chicago.
I love the sound of the ocean, and I love a cold beverage on a hot day, but I hate the beach because I hate sand. You spend 1-2 hours at the beach, and then suddenly everything is covered in sand. So you shake out your things, and you rinse off your legs, and you go home. But there's more sand. So you shake out your things again, and you rinse off your legs again, and then maybe, for good measure, you take a shower with soap, and still, somehow, when you tuck yourself into bed at night, there are just these little pinpricks of discomfort that prevent you from relaxing. Racism can show up in a lot of ways. It can be loud and brash and incredibly violent, and it can be subtle, dismissive, ignorant. It can be no more than a pinprick of discomfort, something you might not even notice. But 1 becomes 2, becomes 20, and then one day you wake up and you realize that you're covered in sand. Sand that can be really hard to wash off. It wasn't until I was about 14 years old that I realized I'm not white. Of course, I knew that my dad was Japanese, which technically made me half white, half Japanese, but I don't know, I wasn't my dad. He has tan skin and black hair, and he speaks English with a very thick Japanese accent. So yeah, in our then 74% white suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, it was clear that he wasn't white. He was other, and people saw him as other, and that was very evident, even as a child. Some of my most visceral memories from being a kid are of being out in public and being ready to defend him. We're at the bank, and I'm fuming because instead of answering his very well-informed question, the bank teller is just repeating the same sentence louder and louder. Or we're at the grocery store, and I'm just quietly scanning every face that walks by, making sure we're not going to get any trouble. Or if we went to a restaurant, especially if my mom and older sister weren't with us, I would always check the bill and just make sure everything added up to what we ate and nothing more. And it always did, so maybe I didn't need to do all that stuff, but I definitely didn't need to do that for myself. I mean, look at me. I've got pale skin and reddish-brown hair, and I speak English the right way. And for a long time, I thought those qualities made me white. But then I went to high school. And then I grew up, and I realized that 74% didn't see me as one of them. I remember one afternoon, spring semester, sophomore year of high school. I'm sitting in the theater hallway with my friends, waiting for rehearsal to start, and the conversation shifts to the diversity of the school, or more specifically, the lack of diversity at this school. And my friends are sitting there counting all the different people of color in our grade when they pause. They look at me and they go, "Do you count?" No. Up until that point, no, I had not considered myself to count, but I didn't think it was my place to say. So I sat quietly while they deliberated my role in society, and eventually they decided, "We need you to count." And that was a really big moment for me, because up until that point, all of the bowing and the ni-haos and the smart Asian jokes were about my dad being Japanese. But that day, that moment, that was about me, about who I am, about who I'm not. And it was around that time that I signed with an acting agency, which was very, very exciting. And they were also very excited because of my look, because of the space between my eyes and my eyebrows, whatever that means. They were excited because they could send me out for white roles and Japanese roles, Asian roles, ethnic roles. I wasn't going to be confined to one racial box. My ethnic ambiguity was going to be my ticket to the big screen. But then some weeks went by, and some months went by, and I wasn't getting any auditions. So I asked them, "Hey, why am I not getting any auditions?" And they said, "Oh, well, we're submitting your headshots for things, but you're too white, you're too Asian, you're not Asian enough, you're confusing, so nobody wants to see you. But don't worry, kid, times are changing." And to be fair, times have changed, and they are still ever changing. But what I learned that day, what I heard was, we thought you could be anything. Turns out you're nothing. And the question of who I am, what I am, has been a common theme in my life. When I was younger and in standardized testing every year, one of the hardest questions was, what is your race? So I'd stare at the bubble next to white, and then I'd stare at the bubble next to Japanese, and then I'd read the instructions that said, bubble in only one. And I really liked following instructions, so I'd have a little identity crisis because I wasn't only one. And I'd always raise my hand, and the teacher would come over and white. So you can see why I thought that I was white. But I think the world usually sees me as Chinese. One time, I was in an antique mall in South Carolina. I was standing up at the counter, minding my own business, when one of the vendors, who was over there fixing up her stall, had an epiphany. And she came on up, slammed her hand down on the counter, and declared, Chinese! And I was really confused, because, I don't know, we didn't have a Chinese section of the store. There was some dishware in the back, and, Marlene had prints, but close. Half Japanese. I could tell. And that's usually the response that I get. I say, I'm half Japanese. And they go, I could tell. I don't know, could you? But interactions like that don't really bother me, though, because at the end of the day, people are just curious. And there are things a lot uglier than curiosity that could be coming my way, so I'll count my blessings. And when people see a face with a story they probably haven't heard before, and they want to know what it is, I can appreciate wanting to know a good story. I just hope that one day curiosity is just that, not also a veil for judgment. I hope that the jokes can just be jokes, not also insults. I hope that one day we can live in a world in which children don't have to be ready to defend their parents from anything. That little girl who was always ready to fight for her dad went underground after childhood, and by the time I realized I needed her to fight for me, she'd been buried by shame and guilt and fear, by all that stuff that's really hard to wash off. But slowly, with love and patience and education and kindness and trust, I'm beginning to figure it out. I'm beginning to realize that maybe the best way to stand up for myself is to be myself, fully and proudly. And yeah, I'm not white. I'm white and Japanese. I love my cheeseburgers, and I say itadakimasu before I eat them. I'm both and neither and whatever I want to be. And that is not nothing at all.
Thank you, Lillian. Isn't she sweet? She's just a young thing starting out, and she is magnificent. We were talking to my grandson about how he's Venezuelan, he's Italian, he's Norwegian, he's Chinese, he's Vietnamese, and I go, and I'm just Chinese, and he goes, boring. He's 3 years old. Okay.